Hi, and a big welcome back to the channel today, especially if you and I haven't seen each other for a while. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a housing market video, which I haven't done for a short while now. But in particular, I'm going to be talking about why I don't think the housing market will crash this year now. And okay, I'll put my hands up. About a year ago now, I made a dozen or so predictions. And even though all those predictions bar one were correct, most people only remember the one that you get wrong, not the other 12 to 15 that you got right. So I am going to address the elephant in the room, and that was that I thought we would see a housing market correction around about spring of 2021. And of course, that hasn't. We've actually seen a new boom in housing prices. Now, if you've been watching my videos over the last few months, you'll understand all of this. You'll understand why the boom happened with the liquidity, the Federal Reserve, the government, the stimulus. But for those of you who haven't been keeping up, I'm going to be talking about that today so you can understand exactly what happened and why we went into a boom instead of a bust. But just before I talk about that, I just want to remind everyone what I did get accurate last year on those predictions. The first was mass migration, people moving around a lot from state to state. The second were interest rates went lower, which I predicted. More people refinance their homes to get lower rates. More people moved from the cities to the suburbs. Building prices went up. Inflation has been going up. People went for larger houses so they could get an extra office or two offices if both parents are at home. Of course, they needed a room for schooling and, teaching children now. The home became a school for a year, a larger yard and garden space, outdoor space, new government proposals to help first-time buyers, the Federal Reserve buying even more of people's mortgages, and the list just goes on and on and on. So I just want to get those points out there before I go on to what actually wasn't accurate. So the main thing then that occurred, which I didn't expect to occur, and I'm very honest and open about this, with the USA having the world reserve currency, I just didn't think that the government and Federal Reserve, in conjunction with one another, would keep printing trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. I just didn't think that they would risk the world reserve currency status that they have by printing all this new currency into existence. And what this does, it weakens the holdings, the savings of foreign government debts that are holding these dollar-denominated debts. So I just didn't think they would do that. It was a very big risk, but I was wrong and they did do it. Now, personally, I think this was a mistake for the Fed to do it. Yes, they should have done some new currency creation to help those hardest hit in society. I definitely agree with that. I think it's the moral thing to do. But in terms of the other 95% that was used for bailouts and state bailouts and all these other things and sending money to foreign countries for all sorts of random things, I don't think that was the right thing to do. But I won't go into all the politics of this today. I'm just going to stick to the housing market data itself, and also to show you what I think is going to happen as we go through 2021 and what you need to look out for. So let's start with the big one then, and that is that I believe house prices are going to continue going up this year, especially within the United States. And here's why. There are two very distinct things that dictate the price of houses. The first one is interest rates. The lower the interest rate, the more that a household or whoever it is buying a home can afford in terms of a house. And you might think, well, no, people will still go for the same size house and get a lower monthly payment. No, that isn't how human beings think. Human beings think, what can I get? What's the biggest house I can get for this payment? They don't think, okay, interest rates are the lowest they've ever been in history. They're bound to go up soon. And when they do, my home payment's going to be a lot more. No, people don't really think like that. But the benefit of the USA is that you can get 20, 30-year fixed rate mortgages, which you just can't get in other countries. So I do understand it from the USA perspective. The second thing that dictates house prices is inventory levels. And right now we are 50%, or in some states, more than 50% down on year inventory levels. So what does this do? Well, you've seen it all over the news. You've probably seen it yourself if you're looking for a house. It creates bidding wars. Remember, everything I teach comes back to one fundamental foundational principle, which is supply and demand. So when you have a greater supply than you have a demand, the prices have to come down. But when you have a greater demand and a lower supply, prices have to go up. So when you have a 50% decrease year-on-year inventory of houses on the market, and you have a lot of people that are interested in buying a house right now, what does this do? It pushes up house prices. It's very simple fundamentals. So what does a healthy market look like? I would say it's about 6 months supply on the market. That's pretty healthy. What is unhealthy is 6 weeks supply on the market, or when a house goes on the market and the very next day it's got 6 to 7 offers. That is a sign of an unhealthy market. It also creates bidding wars. So whenever you have bidding wars on anything, the prices go up. You've probably been to an auction before, or you've seen an auction on TV where there is an item and it's in very short supply. It could be one of a kind, but let's just say it's a very short, limited supply of those items. And there's a lot of people in that room, you know, the room's packed and they're bidding on this one item. It's only logical that item will go higher in price than it would have done if there was only, let's say, half the amount of people in that room. So why is inventory so low at the moment? Well, I can't tell you for a fact, but I have my theories on this. And the first of those theories is that we simply haven't been building enough homes over the last decade. And this is in a lot of countries. There is so much red tape on building regulations in a lot of states that it makes it very hard for builders to do it. So a lot of builders dropped out after the last recession, but a lot of new ones came about. There have been a lot of building still, but there just hasn't been enough to keep up with the supply of, you know, new people wanting houses and migration and all the other factors that come into this. So that's point number one. Point number two is that people just aren't following the same patterns that we used to see seasonally. The crisis over this last year really interrupted how people move about and how the housing market adjusts seasonally. But I think this will start to go back to normal as we go through this year. The summer, we're probably still going to see a bit of disruption. But I think as we move into the sort of fall time into winter, things will probably start to level off a little bit more. But I don't expect things to come back fully until 2022, back into normal seasonal patterns. Hi, if you're enjoying this video so far, could you do me a quick favor? Just click the like button. It really helps my video to get ranked. And why not subscribe if you want more videos like this from me? And then the third and final point, you've heard me talk about this negative factor a lot of times, and this is the REITs, the real estate investment trusts, and just everyday landlords who are buying up a lot of houses. A lot of the REIT money is sort of institutional investment money. So they're buying up a lot of houses and then they're refinancing them very, very heavily. And what this does again is it pushes up house prices. It creates a lot of liquidity, goes back into the commercial banks. The commercial banks want to get the liquidity out. They don't want to be holding all this money. So of course it's going on more mortgages, more refinancing. It's just creating this cycle that just keeps going on and on and on right now. But in terms of people using houses like second houses and rental houses and portfolios as ATMs, this is exactly what we saw during the last crisis as well. And I think it was estimated that somewhere in the region of 50% of all GDP spending into the economy was in the housing market. It was all the refinancing and renovations and, you know, using that refinancing money to buy hot tubs and everything else. And this was a risk factor back then. And I think it's probably going to become a risk factor very soon in the future too. And if you personally fall into this category and you're taking out excess liquidity from your home, so you're refinancing and you're doing home improvements, that's absolutely fine. Maybe you're paying off high interest debt and you're using your 2% mortgage rate that you've got. Again, absolutely fine. It's always a good idea to get that higher level debt, higher interest debt paid off with lower interest credit. That's always a good thing. However, there's also the flip side of people who I've seen, investing in these home cinema systems for $20,000, buying a brand new truck for $60,000, getting that new hot tub I just mentioned for another few $1,000s. These are not asset purchases, these are liabilities. So I'd say just think really carefully about that, because if you've watched a lot of my videos recently, you'll understand this comment. These things in the future will cost you 5 to 6 times what you've just paid for them now. And no, I don't mean that the prices will rise. I mean the debt level on that will multiply in the future. So here's the big question then. How many new homes do we need to build? Or how many homes do we need to simply come onto the market? But predominantly it's the new builds in order to meet this 6-month equilibrium, shall we call it. I would put that in the region of somewhere around 2.6 million new homes. But here's the problem. This isn't like US dollars where the Fed just prints more. Homes are physical buildings and physical assets, and they require raw materials. Now, what did I say 9 months ago would happen with raw materials because of all this new currency creation? I said raw materials would go through the roof. And what have you been tracking, and what have I been tracking with you on my videos over the last few months? Raw material prices going up. Lumber, copper, PVC, even appliances now. There is a shortage of all of these things. At the same time, you've got more home builders needing these items, as well as manufacturing, industry. When you have all these raw materials and you don't, when you have a requirement for all these new materials, but you don't have enough raw materials because of shortages and supply chain breaks down and everything else, it pushes up the price of these materials. So if you've been following my videos, none of this should come as a surprise to you. But what this is doing is adding around 10% to the cost of all new build houses. It's adding a lot of money. I mean, somewhere in the region of $25,000 is being added to the price as we come through these new builds now. In a few months' time, once the next wave of these new builds become ready, this is when you're going to see a lot of increases in the price of these new builds, because they have to take into account the production cost of the new materials. So let me go over to my screen now then, and I want to show you some data. And we only have this data up to March of 2021 right now, so we don't have the April data yet. But single family permits in terms of new builds, they're up almost 36% year on year. So that's a real strong step in the right direction. Single family starts almost 41% up. Single family under construction 19%. Single family completions up 21%. So this is great because this is all moving in the right direction. However, let me add a caveat to this. What you're then going to see as this increases and more home builders get in on this, on the wave of demand, you're also going to see a tipping point in the future, as always happens, where you have too many homes built at some point, down the line, where there isn't the same level of demand, and then this will help to pull house prices down again. And I'm just reading a lot of comments here where people are saying that home starts are now going up heavily and this will help prices. I don't agree. I don't think it will help prices specifically, but it will help to level things out. And the reason it won't help prices specifically is due to all the supply chain issues that I talked about and the building material prices. So although it would help to bring these prices down, the material costs being up are pushing it back up. So it's really not creating that much movement in the market. Although a lot of people are talking about this and saying all these new builds will bring prices down, I really don't agree because of those fundamentals I just talked about. And then just one other point on what's pushing up house prices, and I've seen this firsthand just in the last 3 weeks in speaking to a lot of realtors here in the US, and that is cash buyers. Because there is so much cash around, so much liquidity, a lot of people are being cash buyers as opposed to getting mortgages on homes. And I'm a cash buyer myself. I wouldn't get a mortgage. So what I'm seeing is that the sellers of homes want to deal with cash buyers. They don't really want to deal with people that are getting mortgages as much. And especially as a lot of the cash buyers are just offering full price, or sometimes even more than full price. It's a quick sale, it'll turn around real quick. So why would a seller want to wait for a long time for all the things and all the process with a mortgage? That's why people are going for cash buyers. And cash buyers are pushing up the prices as well. But I guess most people know me for predicting crashes and when things will turn around. So let me talk about what I feel will turn the market around and what will cause a crash in the future. And it'll come as no surprise, number one is interest rates. If interest rates go up by just 1%, let's say, in the future, this will have to bring housing prices down by around 10%. This is just the law of numbers. But the big question is, do I believe interest rates will go up by 1%? It's possible. I'm not talking about the federal rates here, as in, the federal base rate going up by 1%. I'm talking specifically about mortgage interest rates going up by 1%. And I do think this is possible. It could happen. Do I believe the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England and the ECB and all other banks will raise their interest rates? Possibly, but I don't think so. Not for a long time. The only way I think they would raise interest rates if inflation just got crazy out of control. And actually, inflation in my mind is already way out of control, but because they don't track inflation the way that myself and a lot of economists do via, they use the CPI, which I won't get into it. They swap out a load of stuff to make it look lower. I think inflation's already too high, but we're probably not going to see a lot more inflation until the next wave. So let me just, because I'm getting too complex here. What happens is when you print a large amount of money, the inflation doesn't come for about 12 to 18 months after that money. So what we're seeing now in terms of inflation is the money from last year. So, if you think back to last March, April, May time, that's all the money from that period that's coming through now. And a lot of it still hasn't come through. I'd say probably another 30 to 40% of it hasn't hit yet. So it will hit in another 6 months. Now you're going to compound this with all the other money that's been printed. This is all going to push up inflation. So will the Fed act on this? Will the ECB, will the Bank of England act on it? It's questionable. I think if it gets too far out of control, they will have to. And when they do that and they raise interest rates, then, and again, we don't know what level that would be to at this stage, that would then affect house prices because the mortgage rates would go up as well. And this would affect house prices and pull the values down over a short period of time. It wouldn't happen instantly. It would take a little bit of time to filter through the market, but that's probably something that would bring down house prices. The second point, which is the same as I mentioned before, is inventory levels. So once inventory levels start to reverse and we have a lot more inventory hitting the housing market, this could help to actually bring the prices down again. But just to be clear, I don't think house prices are going to come down in the next few months. I think they're going to continue to go up, and they're going up quite rapidly. Whether or not they'll continue rapidly is another question, but I do believe they'll go up. And I don't think it's just going to be like that and then a crash coming down. I think you should look at it more like a bell curve. So it will go more like that. That's what I think is more likely to happen. And even if a lot of the rug gets pulled out from a lot of things holding the market up, I still think you're probably going to see a plateau for a little while as opposed to just a big cliff drop. And then the third point really is mass unemployment. If we do see true unemployment levels going through the economy, as opposed to the U3 rates and the other stuff that the government shows, which aren't the true unemployment rates, if we did start to see this, it would push out the affordability of a lot of homeowners. But again, I don't agree with a lot of the other people forecasting the mass migration causing this crash, because I think a lot of people have already moved and they've moved into their home that they expect to be for the next few years, because the crisis over the last year has pulled forward a lot of people's thinking. And instead of them thinking where I might buy a house for a couple of years, they're thinking, where would I buy a house that I might be here for 5 to 10 years if this crisis continues? So I personally don't think mass unemployment would create a huge issue, but it would definitely have an impact. But I think one of the key points that no one seems to be talking about at the moment, apart from I think someone like Ken McElroy, I heard him talking about this quite recently, but most people have forgotten about all the forbearance and the rent moratoriums and the unemployment benefits and all these programs going on, it seems as though people have just assumed that these are just going to continue on forever, when they're not. They will at some point come to the forefront of this crisis. They will have an impact. Now, do I agree with a lot of the people who are saying when this finally happens, it's going to cause this huge crash? And I saw Ken talking about a Q4 crash this year. And of course, he's somewhat of a housing expert and authority. So I did look into that. And I think there could be some merit there. But also you've got to think about, well, if those people were evicted and the houses went back and they were sold, they're going to have a lot of equity in those homes. So maybe the bank will just work out some sort of arrangement with those people. But where would those people go? They're going to go into rental accommodation. So someone else is going to buy those homes in order to rent to those people. So I don't think it's as cut and dry as a lot of people are making out. There is a lot more to this than meets the eye. It is very complex. So really, to summarize then, I think that a lot of the housing market experts, including myself, we did get it wrong on what we thought the Federal Reserve would do over the last year. And of course, this stopped this huge housing crash that was due and still is due. You only need to look at the Case-Shiller home price index to see we're way out of scope right now, because of all the points I've already talked about. And in the future, these will correct. But forecasting when, the timing of this, is extremely difficult to do, because it really isn't about the fundamentals anymore. It's also about the government and the Federal Reserve. They are the ones that are, waving the magic wand and controlling this housing market. Until they stop all of this wizardry, there's no real way to predict when house prices will finally turn around. But either way, there's always a cap to any market, because we live in free market economies. So if house prices were to go up another 10%, another 20%, another 30%, eventually people will be limited by their annual salary as to what they can buy. There's always a cap to any market, and if interest rates just went up by, say, 1%, that would again pull the prices down by 10%. So either way, everything will correct on its own eventually, regardless of what the government and the Federal Reserve do. But if you do want somewhat of a timeline or a forecast from me, I do think we're going to continue to see rising house prices through the spring, through the summer. But then once we get to the fall and winter, I think it's really anyone's guess. I'll continue to track all of this. I'll continue to input all the data into my software, which helps me to track everything as well. But as always, I will keep you up to date on everything that I'm seeing, everything I'm tracking, what my software is telling me might happen. So just make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you want future updates. If I ever see an emergency situation happening, such as a large-scale deleveraging or something like that that's coming about, I will update you. I will make an emergency video for the channel so that you're kept up to date. So if you haven't clicked the like button, I'd really appreciate that. It just helps to get the video ranked. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, God bless, and I'll see you next time.